Welcome back, BrookLAN. We're going to be here wrapping up. I'm Charisma Check here with Kevin Miller, and we're going to be wrapping up with round 6.
Round 6. Round 6. We're already here.
It's been a long day.
I said earlier that the rounds were going by quickly, and now it's
now they're starting to slow down.
Now it's a little slow down. It's been a long day, but yet again, as I reiterate, we have another exciting match in our hands.
Yeah, and we're here to keep up the pace as well. Remember, after this round 6, don't go anywhere because we are going to have our Top Cut games streamed as well. And finals, you're not going to want to miss that because everyone so far in this tournament has been playing out of their mind.
Yeah, we've seen some very good plays today. Good Terra calls, reads, RNG, manipulate, like sleep turns, everything. It's been a crazy day of Pokemon.
And not only have we had an excellent display of player skill, the teams have been on fire, and that's not going to stop for round 6. We have a revisiting here from Piero and Jacob, both piloting very, very interesting teams. Jacob, we saw their team earlier today, piloted by a different player. It's going to be that Rain with that Pelipper stuff, but the same 6 Pokemon. How they're EV'd and how they're built might be different, but the same concept there is in Jacob's team. And Piero's team is very interesting as well. They're opting for the King Gambit, right? We get a revisit to the King Gambit, but the new addition to this team is the Ninetales Alola, which I don't think we've seen yet today.
We have not seen today. The new Snow Setter in the DLC, and we see our leads of Farigiraf and Urshifu in front of a King Gambit and Water Ogerpon.
And I really like this lead from Jacob there, where they're able to reposition their Urshifu. Remember, it is that Scarf variant. So you threaten close combat into both these Pokemon. The Farigiraf has Trick Room. And as long as you don't get Kowtow Ivy cudgeled into your Farigiraf, you should be fine.
You would think that close combat is really nice here until you see that this King Gambit is Terra Ghost.
Yeah, right.
A non-conventional Terra type, which honestly, with all the Iron Hands and Urshifu, makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, and not only is it Terra Ghost, it's still the black glasses, so it still wants that damage that you get from the black glasses, but you don't have the Terra Dark to overset the damage, or push the damage over the edge, I should say. We are going to see a withdraw from the King Gambit here, actually. I'm wondering what Pokemon is going to be in the back. Pure revealing that they have the Landorus getting off that Intimidate. Not too sure how much it's going to be really impacting this Urshifu here. If Jacob did decide to go for something like a close combat, Ogerpon, it could pay off a little bit there. We do see a Terrassalization. Very curious what this is going to be.
I believe this will be a Water Ogerpon Terrassalization, removing the convenient Water Absorb for later in the game if Jacob does preserve this Urshifu here. We do see this Embody aspect, the +1 Spadef, and let's see, he locks in U-turn, so I mean the Intimidate plus losing your super effective in a U-turn, a little helpful for Piero here, and we'll see what they lock into.
And that's kind of what I mentioned before. Now your Iron Hands gets to come in for free now if you're Jacob, and you're setting up Trick Room with your Farigiraf. This is a really good position for Jacob to be in. And the fact that even though Piero has the Lando in, you're not able to intimidate the Iron Hands. Even that Ivy Cudgel did a lot of damage.
It does a lot of damage.
I thought that was a critical hit, but that was just normal Ivy Cudgel damage, I guess.
That is just Terra boosted Ivy Cudgel. This Ogerpon is trained in attack. Farigiraf takes it though, able to set up the Trick Room, and let's see if Jacob can capitalize on these Trick Room turns. Has all the speed advantage here.
Yeah, and with this Trick Room up, Jacob is able to go for that Heavy Slam play that we see there, throwing a lot of damage into the Landorus, but I think at the same time, right, if you're Piero, you have something like the King Gambit and a 4th Pokemon that hasn't been revealed yet from both sides. And this Ogerpon is, it's sitting there, but it's doing a lot of damage, and I feel Jacob is almost forced to Terrasilize Grass here so that you don't take in, not super effective, but a strong Ivy Cudgel.
Yeah, we see the Ogerpon actually switch out for his own Iron Hands. Gonna also try and take advantage of that Trick Room. And we see the Terrassalization locked in here from Jacob. It is going to be that Grass Iron Hand trying to get those key resistances that you were talking about.
I think Piero maybe switching in that Iron Hands, reading something like a Wild Charge on the Iron Hands, maybe just realizing how much damage to Ogerpon, instead of just tearing defensively, just going for the offensive play. I don't think a Psychic and a Heavy Slam is going to be able to pick up unless Jacob's Farigiraf has built some special way. Yeah, it's going to barely miss the KO. Stomping Tantrum is going to go into Iron Hands, so the Terra was good there either way, right? You're either getting Stomping Tantrum or you're getting Ivy Cudgeled.
I am always surprised by how much damage Heavy Slam does into Landorus from Iron Hands. That is, doing over 50% is such a big play there for Jacob.
Yeah. And I think here now going for a Dazzling Gleam, you're able to pick up the Lando if Piero does give it to you. The Ogrepon, of course, could come in with that +1 and take nearly negligible damage, but Piero also has to consider if Jacob does decide to double target that slot, right, you are threatening a lot of damage, like something like a Psychic and a Drain Punch in the Lando slot. Drain Punch going first, very important to look at speed tiers there. Piero's Iron Hands is going to be slower than Jacob's in Trick Room, and also faster than the Friggraph in Trick Room.
Yeah. We see the Friggraph actually click Dazzling Gleam, pretty safe there, pick up the Landorus, do decent, super effective chip to the bulky Iron Hands. And Jacob's gotten rid of this Landorus pretty freely. He's controlled Trick Room very well so far.
Yeah, but I think, so going back to turn 1 as well, I think it's very important to note that in exchange for damage with Piero's Terrestrialization Water on the Ogrepon, as you kind of talked about throughout the day when Ogrepon's been on the field or on screen, is that once you Terrestrialize, you lose your main ability. So in the Fire Pond example, you lose Mold Breaker. In this case, you lose not Storm Drain, Water Absorb. So something like the Urshifu, as you kind of mentioned before, isn't a valid endgame piece for before that Jacob has. When you had Water Absorb, when you didn't have the Terrestrialization on your Ogrepon, it's kind of weird because Jacob is in these weird 50-50s. There's, oh, do I click Surging Strikes? Do I click Close Combat? But with the Terra Water, it kind of confirms and allows Jacob to click Surging Strikes.
Yeah, that Urshifu is waiting in the back for these Trick Room turns to expire. It can come in this late game and pressure so much damage. We'll see how the speed tiers interact here with this King Gambit, but again, King Gambit without Terrestrialization feels a lot of pressure from this Iron Hands here. He obviously has Protect, but like you're just, I mean, Protect will stall Trick Room, save your Iron Hands for this turn, but Jacob could easily call this and try and pick up a knockout on this Iron Hands here with the Psychic. And oh, we see the Iron Hands on Piero's side actually go first, meaning we have a speed tie between our Iron Hands.
That's very interesting, and I think Jacob definitely noticed that. Drain Punch going to the King Gambit, but there's no reason to risk it, right? Like, you could double up. Psychic is going to do a lot of damage to this Iron Hands here. Again, there's no Terrestrialization. A double up would have picked up the KO on Piero, but do you really want to give them a free switch into to Ogrepon?
No, you do not. And now this Iron Hands is low enough where if it Drain Punches some health back, I think it'll still be in range of the Psychic from this Friggraph. So. Oh,
for sure. It might even be in range in the Hyper Voice. If you click Hyper Voice, click Drain Punch in Dazzling Gleam, it might even be in range of that. Because of that Rocky Helmet, which is an important note on Jacob's team there.
We see the King Gambit actually swap out, feeling the pressure of this Drain Punch after protected, bringing it back in the Terrestrialized Ogrepon and getting that Spadef boost.
And this is so interesting as well, right? Because if you're in Jacob's position, you're Drain Punching anyways, there's no reason to go for a read. Even if you knew 1,000,000% the Ogrepon was coming in there, I think going for the Drain Punch just makes a lot of sense. You're in a position where you're under Trick Room, you're just going for consistent plays, you're just damaging things. The Drain Punch does come out in the Friggraph, you are going to gain a little bit of HP, but the Rocky Helmet's going to hurt a lot. And when you're out of Trick Room, you're still playing the speed tie game, which is a little unfortunate, but we know that Jacob has the Urshifu in the back, and we hasn't even revealed their 4th Pokemon yet to Piero.
Yeah. We see the Twisted Dimensions return to normal. Jacob can bring out this fast Urshifu and pressure damage first on this turn now that Trick Room is expired. Really well managed turns by Jacob. Friggraph, again, going down, but it allows you to bring out your really fast Pokemon as soon as Trick Room ends. Yeah. You see close combat into the Ogrepon, able to pick it out, and if Jacob wins the speed tie and can just get rid of the opposing Iron Hands, he is in a dominant position.
Yeah, and with that close combat coming out, like you said, it puts Jacob in a really dominant position where I think Piero Terrestrialized a little too early, I think, for my liking, where this Drain Punch is going to hurt the Urshifu. You are going to get a little bit of HP back, but I don't think it's enough to live a Drain Punch from Jacob's Iron Hands. Just based off the damage it was doing before, it might live at like 1, but no, it does pick up the KO from Jacob's Iron Hand there, and this is pretty much, I think, seals the game. The King Gambit, of course, the Urshifu is -1, right? So you could potentially get a Sucker Punch and kill the Urshifu, but like Drain Punch and Close Combat are threatening this King Gambit pretty well.
Both of these Pokemon carrying fighting moves here puts this King Gambit in an unwinnable position, I would say. And I think we will see Jacob pick up game 1.
Yeah, and a very dominant game, what I'd say at that is, I don't think Piero really respected the Trick Room option, where Jacob's just kind of able to freely set up the Trick Room there, get the Iron Hands in against the Lando, no Intimidate, and just kind of go to town. Especially the turn where Piero kept in the Landorus instead of kind of preserving it to maybe intimidate the Iron Hands at a later time. they decide to keep it in and opt to just go for stopping Tantrum to force a Terror maybe out of the Iron Hands. We see a Sucker Punch go out into the Iron Hands from the King Gambit, maybe to just scope out damage. And that's going to be a one-hit KO there from the close combo on Urshifu.
Yep, Jacob will pick up game 1. And to go back to what you were saying, I feel like when you see Jacob's team on Team Sheet, you are immediately threatened by Rain and this very fast Urshifu. But I feel like it allows, like, your opponent overlooks that this team with Farigiraf and Iron Hands Goldengo is a pretty slow team, and if you're able to get up Trick Room and manage your Trick Room terms well, that gives this team a whole nother dimension and makes it even more scary to play against.
Yeah, and not only do you force the a lot of terrestrializations on this team, like for example the Terra Ghost on Piero's team, you're able to force out a lot of those terrestrializations just because the pressure that Urshifu puts on, that Terra Water Searching Strikes, that close combat, and the 4x super effective on King Gambit. Another thing I want to note as well, we didn't get to see it that game, but Pelipper's in the back for Jacob's side. And I think that's very important because if you do bring Pelipper against something like the Ogerpon, you're actually able to force out the terrestrialization, I think, because you're threatening super effective Hurricane damage into the Ogerpon. You almost want to make it Terra Water, right? So Piero has to make a choice where do I terrestrialize into the water and, not be super effective for Hurricane, or do I stay water absorbing, take the Searching Strikes a lot?
Yeah, I don't think necessarily the Terra Water Ogerpon on turn 1 is like a bad play. We saw how much damage it did into the Farigiraf, so if you can maybe capitalize on that and maybe double it into the Farigiraf and stop Trick Room from going up, that could be an advantageous way to terrestrialize the Ogerpon, especially if you get a crit on top. We know Ivy Cudgel is a high crit move. That damage was without the crit, so I still think he can threaten this Farigiraf with that play, but yeah, in that game, he didn't get the damage he needed, and he kind of wasted his Terra a little early. So we'll see if he goes back to that and tries to capitalize it, or maybe save his Terra later.
Yeah, and we are going to see adjustment. Instead of the Ogerpon, we are going to see a Ninetales and Iron Hands taking a bit of a slower approach, realizing that maybe, if I can't out-damage my opponent, and I don't want to rely on the Ogerpon crit, and I don't want to double it because they might terrestrialize or something, I'm just going to play bulky as well.
Yes, this, however, Jacob has a pretty free, he has a pretty free fake out here because he has the Farigiraf. Like, his side has no pressure from being faked out here. He can fake out, stop screen, set up Trick Room, and then threaten this Ninetales with damage the next turn. So I wanted to see if that's what Jacob locks in here.
Yeah, but I think the really smart play that Jacob has opted for here, Piero, I'm really curious what Piero is going to go for here. You have something like the Aurora Veil on the field. You have something like Drain Punch. You don't get the click fake out. Like, the Iron Hands is clicking a damaging move. This is really smart. Jacob switches the Pelipper for the Farigiraf and heavy slams the Ninetales. And this is a great play for several reasons. While you set the Rain, you're denying the defense boost that Snow types or Ice types get now in Generation 9. You're also denying the potential Aurora Veil that this Alolan Ninetales could go for. And it forces a terrestrialization out of this Ninetales now, just like in Game 1, where, before Piero had to be proactive, where they needed to terrestrialize water, and that was kind of a forced position where they needed to do damage. Now you're forcing the Ninetales in a proactive way from turns to Jacob, where you have to heavy slam, and Ninetales potentially can get KO'd if you don't terrestrialize Ghost.
Yeah, such a good turn 1 from Jacob, completely manipulating the board. Pelipper is in such a good spot here, and we saw how much that heavy slam did to a non-4 times weak Ninetales. So very, very good play from Jacob. Let's see how he capitalizes on it.
And I just think this momentum, again, getting that Pelipper in super early, right? Because Jacob has opted for the Focus Sash item compared to something like Goggles or Rocky Helmet, a lot of the times Pelippers are able to run 252, 252. And that's just because of the Focus Sash, right? You don't really need bulk on a Pokemon that's just getting one shot anyways. But it just does so much damage with Stab Hurricanes. And again, having the access to that new move, Weather Ball, being 100% accurate is super, super good for the game. We are going to see a Protect there from the Ninetales, just making sure it doesn't get KO'd. Not really sure what it's doing back, but saving it. Maybe Piero has a plan for it here. The Iron Hands might go for something like a Wild Charge into the Pelipper.
It does click Wild Charge into Pelipper. However, the Focus Sash saves it this turn.
This is so much recoil, though.
Oh, yes. You are taking a lot of recoil. Let's see what Jacob's Iron Hand locks into. Wild Charge into the Ninetales. Maybe expecting a swap there, conserving weather. So kind of a good Protect there from Ninetales. Really put the momentum a little bit back in his favor.
Yeah,
maybe he does swap out the Maybe he does swap out the Ninetales here and conserve that weather and is able to get out late game screens. But I think that was a pretty good protect on this turn.
I think now it's up to Piero to kind of decide what Jacob's game plan is, right? Do I think Jacob wants the rain for Urshifu late game? Do I think, because you can assume with Pelipper that Jacob has something like the Urshifu in the back to be boosted up by that rain, and it's up to Piero. Do I preserve? Is Ninetales that important to my game plan that I need to preserve the snow to reset this, the hail, or excuse me, the rain?
He does apparently think that because the Ninetales swaps out into the King Gambit here as a defensive switch in. We see the Weather Ball into the King Gambit, who is not a Soul Vest. This is rain boosted.
This is going to do a lot of damage.
Do a decent damage, over about 60% damage there we see. And Heavy Slam doing nothing to the King Gambit as it's resisted and a very heavy lad. But we see Drain Punch just continuously being clicked into his Iron Hands, whittling it down. And Piero's Iron Hands is almost at full health.
Yeah, and I think now that Jacob knows that Piero switched out the Ninetales, they definitely want to match weathers again. That's the whole point of Pelipper, right? Those weather wars where you really want your weather to be the dominant weather because usually it's boosting something for your team. Yeah. In Piero's case, it's that Aurora Veil with that snow, and Jacob is boosting the Urshifu. King Gambit coming in here, though, is very interesting because you are threatening something like a Sucker Punch or a Kowtow Cleave. You could even go for a Swords Dance. It's a little risky with the Drain Punch staring you down, but you could go for it.
Yeah. Jacob seeing that the Ninetales switches out last turn, once you have their Weather Setter switch out first, you are free to then regain your weather advantage, which we see here. Pelipper comes back just in case the Ninetales comes back in later. We see the Farigiraf to stop the potential Sucker Punch priority here. Very nicely played by Jacob. We'll see if that's what happens. Actually, King Gambit switches out here, maybe going straight back into the Ninetales, and that is exactly what happens, getting the weather advantage back for Piero, and we see the snow being set again.
Yeah, and it comes down to a speed tie here because Drain Punch might... Oh, Jacob's Drain Punch goes first instead of Piero's, and that's going to allow this Iron Hands to live just an extra turn.
This speed tie has been happening, been affecting these trainers back-to-back games, whether in Trick Room or not in Trick Room. These Pokemon not knowing who's going to go first is really kind of like a guessing game each turn.
And again, this is those weather wars, right? Because this Iron Hands, you're not doing any damage to it, so you have to make a decision if you're Jacob. If you stay in with your Farigiraf, you get to do more damage to Iron Hands, but this Ninetales might get an Aurora Veil up. And that could be equally as dangerous as if you switch out your Farigiraf here and go into the Pelipper. Because what Piero could do, right, is, okay, you did this before, I'm just going to click something else. Or we might see a switch here from the Ninetales.
Yeah, if the Ninetales preserves itself here, Piero can win the Weather War, but we see the Icy Wind actually making sure that his Iron Hands will always outpace this other Iron Hands.
And that's really smart as well.
Unless this Farigiraf gets up Trick Room, and then Jacob's Iron Hands goes first every time. But
I don't think it will because the Drain Punch is going to fire off. That's what the Icy Wind's for, right? You guarantee outspeeding the Drain Punch. You just win that war. And your Iron Hands is looking really healthy if you're Piero.
Yeah. And now with the two Pokemon down, Piero can switch out this Ninetales and maybe eventually do get up the Aurora Veil at some point.
Yeah, I'm really scared, right? Because if Piero does have that Ogerpon, it's like we talked about in Team Preview where you have chosen to preserve your Terra on Ogerpon, and now you're going to be rewarded for it. Yeah. You have the Water Absorb. Jacob can no longer endgame you with Urshifu, really. Jacob has to make a choice here to lock into a move, and it's most likely going to be close combat because you don't know what's back.
Yeah, because if you lock into the water move here, and he does indeed have the Ogerpon in the back, you can't do any damage the rest of the game. So we'll see what Jacob decides here. We see the Iron Hands switch out. Is this into the Ogre? Oh, into the King Gambit.
Interesting.
Very interesting. We see King Gambit swap in. We see the Terrasilize on Jacob's side. Is this Water Urshifu? Is he locking in the Surging Strikes? That is a very interesting play. I mean, it could be highly rewarded if Piero doesn't have this Ogerpon in the back.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if Piero didn't have Ogerpon. I feel like it's kind of a mandatory bring into rain. But at the same time, Piero has a clear game plan here with the Terra Ghost. Ninetales going for turn one. I actually don't know if Dazzling Gleam will be able to pick up the KO on this Ninetales.
This Ninetales isn't carrying Dazzling Gleam, I believe.
Or excuse me, the Farigiraf. I don't know if it's going to be able to pick up the KO.
We see the Icy Wind getting maybe the speed back in Piero's favor for this endgame. And let's see what Farigiraf clicks. Psychic. Will this pick up the Ninetales at low health? It is not enough. So this Ninetales will continue to have the speed advantage going forward. So
I think if you're Piero, right, and you have Ogerpon in the back, then you really want to, you low-key kind of wish you had it there. I mean, you win this always, right, because the Urshifu is locked into the move there. If you're Jacob, you really don't have an out here, I don't think. Your out, I guess, is clicking Psychic and getting rid of this Ogerpon. But I don't think Piero is going to really allow you. Wait,
Piero doesn't lock in.
We see Icy Wind. No follow me.
He does not lock in to follow me. We see the Icy Wind. What does Piero click here with his Ogre Pawn? We see Surging Strikes go into the Ninetales here.
This is probably an Ivy Cudgel, I think, into the Furgraph.
Well, maybe he that, or just he might just try to go for the grass move and just take out this.
But like that play does make sense on Piero, right? Like you don't have to follow me that turn, like because if you follow me, right? Oh, Urshifu lives.
Urshifu lives the Horn Leech. Psychic from the Furgraph will do good damage in this Ogre Pawn. Tanks it decently, and thankfully no special defense drop.
So, like, I think from Piero's perspective, I think if you follow me, you could lose potentially to Psychic because you're at full health. So you don't get healed by anything, and then Psychic could do a lot of damage. And if you don't KO the Urshifu. Now we see the follow me because of the last two Pokemon. This makes a lot of sense. Iron Hands here. Doesn't even have to go for Fake Out. Surging Strikes. Gonna heal up that Ogre Pawn. I think only one hit is all you really get to do. Drain Punch is gonna go off from the Urshifu there. Weird targeting. I think the Urshifu this one you can just Rage Powder.
Funnily enough, a play that Piero could make is fake out the Urshifu and try and get a water boosted, rain boosted Ivy Cudgel into this Farigiraf.
That's trolling. That's trolling.
However, we see the follow me. We see the Psychic into that slot, and we saw how much damage it did last time. A little more this time, actually. But I think Piero has enough damage to take this game, damage output here to take this game.
Yeah, this Iron Hands coming in here really healthy. I think the problem in this game, too, for Jacob was he didn't really have the opportunity to damage the Iron Hands. There was no immediate pressure from something like the Trick Room and Iron Hands like we saw in Game 1. Even though they're speed tied, it's really, really weird. I think like an adjustment I want to see is I want to see something a little bit more aggressive that's not the Urshifu. Until you know you can get rid of the Ogre Pawn, I feel like Urshifu is such a liability.
Yeah, interesting here. I think the Weather Wars actually deterred Jacob's aggressive plays a little bit. He was so worried about winning the Weather War and making sure that Piero couldn't get screens up, and it almost worked in Piero's favor anyway because he was able to chip down at things and find this end game with his Water Ogre Pawn.
Yeah, exactly, and I think finding that end game is really going to be the key to both of these players here. Both of them really need to figure out what is my end game and how do I get there, because in that game, Piero excellently demonstrated that Ogre Pawn is my end game piece. I'm going to protect it this time. I'm not going to terrestrialize it early. I'm going to make sure it's the end game. I can 1v1 this Furgraph and this, or 1v2 is Furgraph and Urshifu. Hands is there at full and was able to just seal that game too.
Yeah. Interesting to see if Jacob tries to go like prioritize getting Trick Room up again here, because we saw how dominant he was in Trick Room in this matchup. However, bringing the Ninetales does really make it interesting because I think Jacob was able to do so much in Trick Room because there was no threat of screens like limiting his damage. So I think we saw how much Furgraph was doing without screens, like not a lot of damage here. So I think it's going to be interesting if Jacob can get up Trick Room again and be dominant, but because of these screens threat from Ninetales.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too, is like I think the idea of screens scared Jacob more than the actual screens themselves.
Yeah.
The idea of the snow, like you said, the Weather War, I think kind of deterred Jacob's main game plan of set up Trick Room and outplay. I think worrying about the weather too much and getting worry about Aurora Veil, like if you're Piero, you're mitigating damage either way, if that makes sense. So you're either getting Jacob to switch out and not do damage, or you're setting up Aurora Veil and getting him to not do damage. It's very a tricky matchup, and the fact that the Ninetales did live, that Heavy Slam as well is super big. And I think both of your key Pokemon being led from Piero there is really strong, but this is exactly the kind of lead I want to see from Jacob.
Yeah. If Ninetales is giving you issues, let's bring in Goldengo. You're free to set... Doesn't matter if you're setting up screens, if this Goldengo can set up nasty plots and do big damage here. So I think a very good adjustment from Jacob.
Yeah, and instead of going for the Trick Room, now you have something like the Tailwind instead of Trick Room to just go fast. And that's the cool thing about this Rain team, I think, is you have a fast mode and you have a slow mode. You could have Furgraph Hands in the back. You could go for Trick Room slow stuff. You have the Tailwind. You have to make it rain. And as we saw earlier with the Metal Coat, you're able to just do so much damage, but you still have access to things like Protect.
Yeah, and important here that leading the Ninetales and Pelipper gives Jacob the Weather War, but we see the Heatran switch in here.
We see an adjustment, and that's going to be Heatran this game. I think it's very interesting bringing it into a rain team. But again, if you are confident that your piece is that Water Ogre Pawn and you do want to bring it, I think that was super well thought out by Piero. We are going to see how well it's going to be able to pan out here. The Ninetales switching out to reset that weather. As you said, Spiky Shield, seeing what this Golden Go really wants to lock into. Is this a nasty plot or make it rain?
We see the Tailwind from Pelipper, ensuring that his team goes fast for the next couple turns. This Goldengo Terra
It's a nasty plot!
And gets the free nasty plot up here. Now with the Terra Dragon, it is, and Rain up, it is not going to be threatened by these.
Nothing.
It is not going to be threatened by these fire moves, even if Ninetales swaps in. And
this
gets rid of
Heatran is Terra Bug with Flamethrower, Earth Power, Protect, and Substitute. No Flash Cannon, so no stab damage even. You're Earth Powering into this Goldengo, and while there's no lefties recovery on this Goldengo, you're not doing much to it.
Yeah, and we see the Terrestrialization from Piero. Probably, maybe the Water Terror to get a Spadef boost here. Yep, that's what we'll see. In rain, give me this Water Terrestrialization, give me boosted damage, give me a Spadef boost in front of this +2 Goldengo.
But the really scary thing, right, is now that you've seen the Spiky Shield all from Piero's side, is Jacob has a free Hurricane Shadow Ball in that slot, which I don't think at +2 would really care about the Ogre Pawn.
And we see the Heatran Protect, so if he did double into this spot, he's going to do a lot of damage. Hurricane, decent
Actually,
chip.
that did nothing.
Shadow Ball +2 into the +1 Ogre Pawn. How much does it do? It does not
lives.
pick
That
up.
Terrestrialization be huge. Horn Leech coming out of the Pelipper, doing a little over half damage there. That's big.
Yeah. I mean, you're kind of forced to target the Pelipper there because this Goldengo resists both your stabs here. Like, this Goldengo is in such a good position here. And now with the Heatran protecting, I think Jacob is in the driver's seat here to, like, even take out this slot, too.
And it's so interesting as well because Pelipper is actually faster than Goldengo. So you aren't even able to go for a Shadow Ball and then a Weather Ball into the Heatran. And, of course, if you remember, Weather Ball isn't always a water move. It changes if Piero decides to switch in Ninetales here, which would make a lot of sense for this Heatran.
Yeah. When you're fearing the Weather Ball, you change the weather. However, Jacob calls that and brings in the Iron Hands.
And this was really well played. I wouldn't be surprised to see a Spiky Shield from this Ogre Pawn here. Again, Piero just playing it super safe, realizing how much of a carry this Ogre Pawn is.
We see Jacob lock Shadow Ball into the Water Ogre Pawn. I mean, I think that you're fine with that if the Ogre Pawn wanted to protect that turn. If not, Shadow Ball picks up and you're in a good spot.
But this is super scary now, right? Because if you're Jacob, you are able to go for something like just like a fake out, make it rain. And Piero just kind of has to protect the Ninetales and stall out a turn, or you could just switch in Pelipper. Like Jacob has a lot of the offense here on this turn where they're able to just click buttons. Having this Goldengo at +2 is insane.
Yeah, Goldengo very well positioned here. Very good adjustment from Jacob going into this Game 3. We see the Ninetales actually swap right back out into the more defensive Assault Vest, Iron Hands. I think that's a pretty good switch from Piero. We see the Iron Hands switch out for Jacob's side and go into the Farigiraf. Very interesting switch from Jacob here. Not resetting the rain. Let's see what we see. Shadow Ball from faster Goldengo and Tailwind into this Ogre Pawn, and it is enough to take it out.
Yeah, that Horn Leech, unfortunately, was not enough. It did not recover enough HP from that Pelipper there to live that Shadow Ball, which is kind of the, the piece of resistance, as we've been talking about Piero's team. That Ogre Pawn is kind of carried throughout this matchup. Luckily, Jacob did not bring Urshifu this time, so that Terrestrialization wasn't as quote-unquote wasted. I think it still gave a lot of value, that +1 allowing to live the turn. I just think I would have liked to see a little bit more come out of it, which is a little unfortunate. The Farigiraf here now on the field of Jacob's side, and Heatran, with the snow up, is able to click Flamethrower without a worry.
Yes, I think Jacob realizing that maybe Make It Rain isn't the best move on Goldengo in this matchup, but these +2 Shadow Balls are doing so much damage as we see it chip a very bulky Iron Hands. As Heatran goes for the sub, maybe predicting Heatran's not getting targeted this turn. And that is the case, so a very good substitute. We see Psychic into the Iron Hands, will do decent damage, and this Iron Hands is chip low. And we see the Drain Punch in the Goldengo doing alright damage, getting some health back.
That looks like a 3-hit KO to me, and it looks like it's in range of Shadow Ball, to be honest, but the problem now is this Heatran. And with the leftovers as a substitute, if you mismanage your Goldengo, you might be out of a game.
Yeah, this Heatran having a very bulky Pokemon, having the substitute in its arsenal makes it very annoying to deal with in this situation.
Yeah, and with Pelipper being your last Pokemon and its Focus Sash being broken, even though Flamethrower is Heatran's only mode of attacking, because it has that substitute up, if you don't get rid of it, Weather Ball is going to be able to break the substitute, but Flamethrower might just get the KO on you.
Yeah, we'll see how Jacob prioritizes maybe doing damage here or trying to change the weather. So maybe the fire moves on Heatran are a little weaker.
And I feel like you're almost forced as Jacob because if you do Psychic and Iron Hands, even though you know you're faster, you might miss the KO. So doubling up here just makes the most sense. A Shadow Ball does luckily pick up, so maybe the Psychic, with maybe like a critical hit, could potentially break the substitute.
I think the Heatran might leave this turn with its substitute intact as it gets a nice Earth Power into this Goldango, doing very good chip damage. We'll see the Psychic lock in from the Farigiraf, but I don't think it breaks
I would
be shocked if this breaks the substitute. And we see that it does not. Heatran gets another turn of leftovers and got a free Earth Power into this Goldango. However, you lost your Iron Hands that turn, and you're back into the Ninetales.
Yeah, and it's like we said before, so this Ninetales does have Protect, right? You have Bring Your Trastalization. There's no Ghost Tear to save you this time, and you aren't Focus Sash. I think this is going to be a game-changing turn here.
Yeah. I mean, do you allow screens on this turn? Do you go into Pelipper? Do you try and get a speed change with Trick Room? A lot of plays Jacob can make here. And let's see if Piero can call the right play. I don't think he's out of this yet if he can call what Jacob wants to do here.
Yeah, I think so. I think getting rid of the Iron Hands on Piero's side and the Ogerpon, those two big threats that Jacob kind of lost to in Game 2, getting rid of them and bringing it down to Ninetales Heatran is really good. We are going to see a Blizzard, no Aurora Veil, going off into the Farigiraf. It does connect.
Could it freeze? It does not freeze. We see the Flamethrower from the Heatran doubling up into this Farigiraf, but Farigiraf hangs on. Farigiraf is a very bulky Pokemon and is able to set up this Trick Room and put the speed back in Jacob's favor.
And this is very interesting as well because you do set up the Trick Room, but now it's going to come down to who's faster, your Pelipper or your Heatran. And that's a little scary, I think, if you're Jacob.
Jacob needs to break this substitute first so he can get in his Pelipper and have the potential to get off a Weather Ball.
I think a +2 make it rate is enough. But the problem is this Ninetales does have access to Protect, which doesn't go for. Psychic is going to go into the Heatran. That might break substitute.
2 Psychics into this Heatran. Does it break sub?
It does. And Make It Rain's going to do a lot of damage here. No Assault Vest still, even though it's 4 times resistant. Earth Power is slower than the Goldango.
And it goes first, and the Goldango is not able to get up an attack here. What does Piero?
Not killing the Ninetales is huge.
What does Piero? Not even breaking the sash on Ninetales.
There's no sash, but.
Oh, I was like, say, my bad. We see Blizzard, and Farigiraf holds on. Okay, this game is getting interesting. This Heatran is still at full health and is pretty slow by the looks of things.
So you do bring in your Iron Hands here, and you are able to 1v1 the Heatran, I think, very confidently. I think Goldango, right, like, I almost wish the Farigiraf kind of, like, went down, but Helping Hand here is just going to do a lot of damage. You are not worried about the Ninetales at all. Piero's saving grace here is Blizzard Freezers.
Yeah. I think one Blizzard Freeze completely changes this game.
Yeah. But if you are on Piero's side, right, you could just go for double Protect.
Yep. 100%. Stall a turn of Trick Room. Try and get some momentum back in your turn by getting these Trick Room turns going. But I think Jacob saving this Pelipper in the late game with this Weather Ball waiting for Heatran is something Piero definitely has to worry about.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you're delaying the inevitable if you double Protect here, but it is just, I feel like, the correct play.
We see the Protect from Ninetales, but not from Heatran. Helping Hand into this Iron Hands. Drain Punch. Will this just take it out? And it does.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be game, and Jacob taking it there. Heavy Slam is inevitably looking down this Alolan Ninetales to take it out. No Terastallization goes to save it this time at that sliver of HP. Helping Hand, Heavy Slam at that. And congratulations to Jacob taking that set 2-1.
Yeah, very good set play from Jacob. Had a tough game in Game 2 and adjusted very well in this game. I think the Pelipper lead was very key in this matchup.
Yeah, again, getting the right foot on that Weather War and kind of realizing that I'm just going to play it like how I did before. Focus on getting that Trick Room up, making sure my Iron Hands is able to underspeed the main threats on the team, like the Ogerpon and the Iron Hands, even though it's a tie, but just making sure I have the general idea of I want to be slower than my opponent. I'm going to take things my way, and we're going to play under my terms and conditions.
Yeah, I think Jacob was also smart to rely on this Goldango more than the Urshifu. bringing the Urshifu was almost a win con for Piero if he has that Water Ogerpon like stashed away. So relying on this Goldengo with its bulk, with its Terra Dragon, and even if 3 out of his 4 Mons resisted Make It Rain, those +2 Shadow Balls did so much damage and so mumuch residual. It was such a good bring for Jacob. So very good adjustment and a very good win in that game. I think it's your top cut for Jacob. He goes 5-1 on the day, and I would say that's enough to make cut, I would think.
Yeah, I think 5-1 does guarantee Jacob that top cut there. Very excited to get in that ASAP. That Goldengo, really the MVP. I'm excited. I'm a big Goldengo fan. So seeing it actually make it into the top cut here from Jacob on that Rain team, I love both those things. So it's like together. Maybe I'll steal that team next for my next event. But both those players played amazingly, and congratulations to Jacob again. We're going to be back soon with our top cut. Give us a little bit of a break, though. We'll be back soon here at the BrookLAN local.